This is the story of a private detective who has solved murder after murder, puzzle after puzzle, until death itself feels like a language he can read. But now a new case lands in his hands. The murder of a priest, an incident so disturbing it seems to shake the whole world. Welcome cinema lovers. Today we are talking about Wake Up Dead Man. The film opens on calm darkness. In a quiet room, we meet the private detective Benoit Blanc. He sits with a story in his hands, reading as if every sentence might hide a clue. He is focused, almost motionless, the kind of man who can listen to silence and still hear lies. Somewhere beyond the walls, phones ring and headlines spread. But Benoit stays with the pages because he knows that every great crime begins as a story people tell themselves. He turns one more page, and it feels like the world turns with it. The story cuts to a young man who has only recently become a priest. His name is Jude Duplessis, and even in a collar he carries the posture of a fighter. In a flash of anger he throws a powerful punch at another man. The reason becomes clear almost immediately. Jude used to be a boxer. Word spreads fast. A church council is called, and Jude is brought in to face the people who decide who belongs in the clergy and who does not. They tell him that what he did is against everything a priest should be. Jude does not argue. Instead he tells them the truth about his past. He was not just a boxer. He was known for being dangerous, and one night, inside the ring, he lost control. He beat the man in front of him so badly that the opponent died. Jude has carried that guilt ever since. He calls himself a beast. He says there is no greater sin than taking a life, and he cannot escape the memory of what he did. Even now, he says, his hands sometimes feel stained, as if they remember the impact on their own. That is why he became a priest. He wanted to spend the rest of his life serving God, hoping that faith and discipline could be his punishment and his cure. Yet he admits something frightening. The boxer is still inside him. Most days it sleeps, but when he feels threatened, it wakes up. The council sends Jude outside while they debate his fate. After some time, a senior priest named Father Langstrom steps out to speak with him. Jude begs for one last chance. He apologizes and promises it will never happen again. Langstrom listens, then tells him the decision inside is harsh. The council is ashamed, angry, and many of them want Jude gone. Still, Langstrom offers a narrow escape. Near New York, he says there is a small town with a small church. The church is overseen by a man named Jefferson Week, a well-known figure there. If Jude agrees, Langstrom can send him to work under Jefferson. It is not a promotion, it is a trial. Jude accepts immediately. When Jude reaches the town, it looks ordinary, quiet streets, familiar routines. But the moment he enters the church, he notices something wrong. The place where the crucifix should hang is empty. In a church, that absence feels like a wound. Jefferson Weeks arrives soon after. He is charming in a strange way, confident, and slightly unsettling. He studies Jude and says, "So you're here to take my place." Jude explains that he is not replacing anyone, he is here to assist. A woman named Martha appears as well. She manages the church's daily life, repairs, supplies, and most importantly the accounts. Donations come through her hands. Jefferson then surprises Jude with a request, "Hear my confession." Jude sits with him, ready for ordinary sin. Jefferson, however, speaks bluntly and shocks him. He confesses that he masturbates often, sometimes multiple times a day. Jude is startled, remembering Langstrom's warning that Jefferson is mentally unstable. But Jude forces himself to stay composed. A priest listens. A priest does not flinch. Jude tries to settle into his role. He meets Martha properly and learns how the donations are handled. He also learns that Martha is secretly in love with a man named Sam, who lives behind the church. When Jude meets Sam, he finds a quiet, decent man who clearly loves Martha back. Their relationship feels like the only honest thing in a place filled with half-truths. As Jude spends more time in town, he notices something else. People here can turn angry quickly, as if the town has been holding resentment under the surface. Behind the church is an important grave, the grave of Jefferson's grandfather, Prentice Week, remembered as extremely wealthy. One day Jude brings a new crucifix, determined to restore the church. He tries to place it where it belongs, but Jefferson stops him sharply and orders him to leave the space empty. Jude cannot understand why. Jefferson says only one name, Grace. The way he says it makes the name feel like a curse. Jude goes to Martha for answers. Who is Grace, and why has her shadow kept this church without a cross? Martha hesitates, then tells him the story. Grace was Jefferson's mother. She lived in her own world, distant, uninterested in people. Prentice Weeks could not accept that, especially when Jefferson was a child. So Prentice offered Grace a bargain. If she stayed near the church and took care of Jefferson, she would inherit the family fortune. Grace agreed, and Jefferson grew up in the church's orbit. But later, Prentice told Martha something cruel. He planned to give Grace nothing. Soon after, Prentice died. When Grace went to claim what she believed she had earned, she discovered the money was gone. The accounts were empty. She became convinced Prentice had donated his wealth before dying, leaving her with nothing. All Grace received was a small box labeled Adam's apple. That final insult broke her. She returned to the church in a violent rage, destroying whatever she could. Martha tried to stop her, begging her to seek forgiveness, but Grace attacked Martha viciously until police intervened. Not long after, Grace went to Prentice's grave. There, she died. Her head had been badly injured. People whispered about what really happened, but no one ever spoke clearly. The church has carried that wound ever since, and the missing crucifix became a silent reminder of the chaos Grace left behind. From that point on, Jude watches everything more carefully. Jefferson's mood swings, Martha's guarded expressions, the way townspeople speak politely while hiding sharp opinions. Then comes a day when Jefferson delivers a public speech and the town gathers, giving Jude a clearer view of the people caught in Jefferson's gravity. He meets Vera, a young woman whose father was once Jefferson's close friend. Vera's life changed when her father adopted a boy named Shai and brought him home. Vera never wanted a brother forced on her, but she had no choice. After her father died, Vera ended up raising Shai, not out of love but out of obligation. Over time, she grew to resent him deeply, convinced her father ruined her childhood by bringing Shai into their home. Now she believes Shai is ruining her adulthood too. Shai wants influence. He starts a YouTube channel, posting content to reach more people, to build a following, to become a leader in his own way. Vera hates it. She refuses to see him as family, and every success he has feels to her like another theft. Jude also meets Nate, the town's only doctor. Since the death of his wife, Nate has become hollowed out by grief. He still treats people, but he looks like a man who no longer believes life is fair or kind. There is Lee Ross, a writer who once created popular stories. At some point, he decided to become Jefferson's follower. He moved to town and began writing about Jefferson as if documenting a great spiritual figure. Instead of helping him, the obsession begins his decline, as if surrendering his mind has drained his talent. And there is Simone, a musician who struggles to walk because of problems with her leg. She has become one of Jefferson's devoted supporters, donating money in the hope that faith and were Resha Madonami in the hope that faith and Jefferson's promises will somehow make her better. Jefferson's speech itself is disturbing. He uses strange words and speaks in ways that feel more like manipulation than ministry. Many people stand up and leave, refusing to listen, but the ones who remain are intensely devoted. They do not seem like ordinary believers. They look like people who have handed their judgment over to one man and are terrified of taking it back. Judah begins to realize a pattern. These followers do not truly confess their sins. They avoid responsibility and hide behind Jefferson's authority. Wanting to break that spell, Jude invites them to his home for dinner. He hopes that in a more personal setting, honesty might return. During the meal, Jude begins with himself. He admits his past, the man who died because Jude lost control, and the guilt that still follows him. Then he asks them to do the same, to name their wrongs so he can pray for them and guide them back to real repentance. The dinner collapses. The followers refuse. They say they will confess only to Jefferson, not to Jude. Some accuse Jude of trying to challenge Jefferson's position. Martha warns Jude he is pushing too hard, but it is too late. One by one, the guests leave in anger, their faith turning defensive and hostile. In the quiet afterward, Jude understands what he is facing. Not a simple congregation, but blind devotion. And blind devotion, he knows, can become violent. The next day, Martha returns alone. Her hands shake as she finally confesses the biggest secret of her life. Something she has carried for years. Something that changes the shape of everything. Whatever she tells Jude is so explosive that when Jefferson hears of it, even he is shaken. For the first time, his confidence cracked. Soon after, Jefferson comes to Jude again and says he wants to confess once more. Jude braces himself, expecting the truth beneath the town's mysteries, the missing crucifix, Grace's strange death, and the fear inside the church. Can't. But Jefferson begins exactly as he did before. He says casually, almost proudly, that he masturbated again. Nen. Jude listens, trying to keep his face neutral, but inside he feels the same chill he felt when he saw the empty space on the wall. If Jefferson keeps returning to this one crude detail, Jude wonders what he is trying to hide behind it. In this town, even a confession can be a smokescreen, you know? After hearing Jefferson's latest confession, Jude's restraint finally broke. Everything he had witnessed in the town, the strange sermons, the obedient followers, the missing crucifix, the way people surrendered their judgment, suddenly fit together into one ugly shape. Jude no longer saw Jefferson as a spiritual guide or even a troubled priest. He saw a performer wearing holiness like a costume. Conti Jude accused him of being a fraud and a hypocrite, someone who had learned how to say soothing things only to keep his own mind quiet. In Jude's eyes, Jefferson was no longer even living with the dignity expected of an ordinary man, lone someone entrusted with faith. He had been feeding on people's weakness, taking advantage of anyone who came seeking peace, and swallowing their money while pretending to offer salvation. Jude believed that if Jefferson had any remaining decency, he would at least respect the religion he claimed to represent. You count. The confrontation did not end with reflection or remorse, it ended with violence. Jefferson struck Jude with a heavy punch, the kind that carried more than physical force. It carried a philosophy. Jefferson's worldview had no room for mercy. To him, anger was power. Forgiveness was weakness. Forgiveness was weakness. Confession was surrender. Admitting guilt made a person soft, and softness invited defeat. Even the idea of repentance, the foundation of what Jude had tried to become, was treated like an insult. Then Jefferson's mood turned again, slipping into a smug, almost playful composure. He wore the language of absolution as if it were a trick, granting forgiveness not because he believed in grace, not stursh, hasht, for curse, but because it allowed him to dominate the moment. He left Jude behind as if the entire scene had proven something only to himself. Jude, shaking with humiliation and fury, shouted after him with words he could never take back. He called Jefferson a stain on the priesthood. He warned that if Jefferson continued to defile the church and exploit people, Jude might someday kill him. That threat did not vanish into the air. It was captured. Shy, always hungry for content and influence, recorded the entire confrontation. He preserved the anger, the accusation, the punch, and Jude's final promise of violence. Sporibam preserved supprumtion. In a town already infected with devotion and suspicion, the video was a match hovering over gasoline. Not long afterward, Jude went to Martha's house hoping to speak privately, to steady himself, to apologize, or perhaps to warn her. Instead, he found the followers gathered there, and Jefferson among them, holding court as usual. The room felt crowded with loyalty and fear. When Jefferson noticed Jude, he hurled a book at him, not as a joke but as a public act of contempt. Jude did not stay to argue. He left, carrying his anger like a fever. He wandered into the bar next door and began drinking. The alcohol did not soften him, it sharpened him into something reckless. In his intoxicated state he grabbed a wolf statue, heavy symbolic, the kind of decoration that looked harmless, until someone decided to use it as a weapon. He smashed it, then staggered toward the church with the broken piece in his hands. In a burst of destructive impulse he threw it at the building. Glass cracked and shattered. The church, already wounded by secrets, gained one more visible scar. The next day the congregation returned as if nothing had happened, drawn by habit and obsession. Jefferson began another sermon, weaving his strange language through the air, watching who stayed and who left. After speaking for a while, he retreated into a private room within the church, and instructed Jude to continue the proceedings. Unit Jude stepped forward and tried to hold the room together, but his attention kept drifting toward the door Jefferson had disappeared behind. Something in his gut felt wrong. When the moment came, Jude moved toward the private room, and what he found there froze him. Unit Jefferson was on the floor. For a few seconds Jude simply stared, trying to convince himself it was another performance, another manipulation, another grotesque test. Then instinct took over. He moved closer. He saw blood. He saw a dagger buried in Jefferson's back. Confusion cracked open inside him, followed by panic. The followers rushed in behind him. In the chaos, they noticed what would become the most damning detail of all. Jude's hands were smeared with blood. The room turned into a storm of accusations before anyone even fully understood what they were seeing. Martha screamed. Her horror was not only for Jefferson's body, but for the dagger itself. The handle bore a carved image that looked like a satyr, a demonic figure, something that could be interpreted as satanic. In a town that already tasted superstition, the symbol became instant fuel. People whispered that it was the devil's work, or worse, that someone had invited the devil in. Police arrived quickly. The chief was Geraldine Scott, a woman with the hard focus of someone used to small-town lies. She began by questioning Jude, not because she disliked him, but because the situation demanded it. Shy had already uploaded the recorded video online, and now the entire town had seen Jude's threat. To Scott, motive had been served on a public platter. Jude insisted he was innocent. Scott did not accept innocence as a feeling. She accepted evidence, and at the moment, everything pointed toward Jude. His threat was public, his hands were bloody, and he had been the first person in the room. Scott forbade him from leaving town, effectively trapping him inside the very place that now wanted him punished. Jude returned to the church alone and sat before God in desperate silence. His faith, already strained, was now being crushed under the weight of a murder he claimed he did not commit. He begged for the truth to surface, not because he trusted the town, but because he had nothing else left to hold on to. Crustaceans. The haste to Bertu Basings for Plupta clan arrived. That was when Detective Benoit Blanc arrived. Benoit was a private detective with a reputation built on solving the kind of cases other people feared touching. He told Jude that Martha had hired him, and that he intended to uncover what really happened. Benoit did not treat Jude like a monster or a saint. He treated him like a person standing too close to a crime. He believed Jude could be innocent, but he also believed innocence needed work to survive. Jude agreed to help. They began with the body, then examined the dagger. Jude recognized the style. He mentioned seeing a similar dagger in the bar on the night he had been drinking, so they went there. The bartender told them the dagger was not from the bar. There had once been a toy resembling it, a cheap prop, but it had broken about a week earlier. Benoit studied the bar, with the patience of someone who knew that truth often hid in ordinary corners. He watched the way people reacted to Jude's presence. He noted the stares, the whispers, the ease with which the town had already chosen its villain. At one point, Nate, the town's doctor, spotted Jude and exploded with rage, publicly accusing him of killing Jefferson. The accusation echoed what everyone was already thinking. Jude had become the town's convenient answer. Benoit did not share their certainty. He returned with Jude to the church and inspected the scene with obsessive care. He studied the walls and the entrances, looking for a route an outsider could have used, but the room was sealed from every side. There was no obvious way for a murderer to slip in, strike, and vanish. The space itself seemed to insist that the killer had been someone already inside. They turned to the CCTV footage. What they found made Benoit's expression tighten. At the exact time Jefferson died, there was a glitch, a brief disruption in the recording. It was small, easily dismissed as technical failure, but Benoit treated it like a fingerprint. Benoit then asked Jude to reconstruct the night he went to the bar. He wanted every detail written down, in order, without excuses or gaps. Jude did it, forcing his memory through humiliation and fog. Benoit read the account carefully. It was the same written story Benoit had been holding at the very beginning of the film, the one he had studied with such unsettling attention. When Benoit finished reading, he looked at Jude differently. He sensed something missing. Jude was hiding a piece of truth, not because he was guilty, but because he was ashamed, or protective, or afraid of what the town would do with it. Under pressure, Jude admitted what he had kept secret. Jefferson had been a heavy drinker, drank even inside the church. On the day of the sermon, after retreating into the private room, Jefferson had been drinking. When Jude rushed in first and leaned over him, Jude noticed the bottle. He never mentioned it, because he feared scandal. He hid it later, intending to protect the church's reputation. Benoit asked where the bottle was now. Jude ran to his room and searched everywhere he had hidden it. The bottle was gone. That meant someone else knew about it, someone who had taken it to erase evidence or to control the story. Benoit realized the truth immediately. The bottle could have explained too much, and now they could not bring it forward without looking like liars. With that path closed, Benoit shifted focus. The only way forward was to question Jefferson's followers, the people who treated him like a prophet. Jude remembered one more key moment from the night he went to the bar. Before drinking, he had visited Martha's house and seen Jefferson speaking to the gathered followers. Jude had been humiliated there, hit by a thrown book, and forced out. Benoit and Jude confronted the group and demanded to know what Jefferson had said that night. No one answered. Their loyalty became silence, and their silence became a wall. Then Shai stepped in, eager to turn tragedy into spectacle. He revealed that he had recorded the entire meeting. He gathered everyone into a room, shut the door, and played the video while angry voices shouted outside, warning them not to watch. The recording exposed truths the town had tried to bury. It revealed that Vera had called the meeting and claimed that Shai was not merely adopted, but Jefferson's biological. Vera's father had been asked to raise the boy because Jefferson could not openly admit the truth, and Vera's father had agreed. Jefferson, on the recording, accepted the claim. He also threatened the people in the room, implying he could destroy their lives if they turned against him. He announced that he would shut down the church after that week, as if he were closing a business rather than a spiritual home. The video also brought up something darker and stranger: money. Shai claimed that his father had discovered information about a hidden treasure worth $80 million, supposedly belonging to his grandfather. Shai did not know where it was. His father died before revealing it. The only clue Shai had was a phrase that had haunted the town for years: Adam's apple. Shai wanted the treasure found, and he offered Benoit a share if he succeeded. That same night, Benoit and Jude searched the church and surrounding grounds, tearing through spaces that carried old grief and newer fear. They found nothing, but Benoit could feel the shape of the puzzle tightening. Someone was arranging people like pieces, pushing them toward the conclusion they wanted. Chief Scott returned to Benoit with renewed certainty. She said the footage proved Jude's guilt. Jefferson had fallen. Jude reached him first, and 9 seconds passed before anyone else entered. In Scott's mind, those seconds were the entire case. She prepared to arrest Jude. Meanwhile, Jude, overwhelmed, wandered into the woods, trying to escape the town's eyes and his own despair. There, the story story turned surreal. Jude saw Jefferson's grave broken open, and Jefferson himself seemed to crawl out alive, moving into the trees like a nightmare that refused to stay buried. Jude watched as the figure seized someone and dragged them deeper into the forest. Jude chased, slipped, stumbled, and forced himself onward, driven by terror and disbelief. Then a fist struck his face from the darkness, and he collapsed unconscious. When Jude woke, he found dead in front of him, murdered brutally. The horror snapped him into motion. He ran. Scott arrived, and Benoit arrived as well. Scott believed this second killing was also Jude's work, proof that he was spiraling into violence. The town launched a manhunt, but Jude did not hide for long. He walked into the police station and tried to surrender. Uffer Blurhermier, believing that perhaps submission was the only way to stop the chaos. Benoit saw him first and pulled him away before the arrest could happen. Benoit did not believe surrender would solve anything. He needed Jude free long enough to reach one place, one person. Benoit asked for the location of Nate's house. They went there together. Inside, they found an even more grotesque scene. Jefferson's body was there, destroyed by acid, unrecognizable in places. Nearby was another corpse, a man whose throat had been crushed, also dead. Jefferson, too, was dead. The case had become a knot of impossible events: a man murdered in the church, a vision of him rising, and now his ruined body discovered elsewhere. The next day, with the town gathered again at the church, Scott arrived to arrest Jude. Jude stood ready, exhausted and resigned, as if he had no strength left to fight the tide. At the last moment, Benoit stopped everything. He revealed that there was a killer who had framed the entire story with precision. The killer had known Jefferson drank alcohol. The killer had slipped a sedative into Jefferson's bottle. 9T for his bottle. After Jefferson drank, he collapsed. Jude rushed in first, exactly as the killer expected. Jude saw what looked like blood, but it was not Jefferson's blood. It was staged. Benoit explained how he realized it. The wolf toy. Jude had thought it was always there behind Jefferson, part of the room's decoration. But at the bar, Benoit had noticed something crucial. There were not one but two wolf toys, later painted red. One had been placed behind Jefferson's back, loaded with fake blood. The other was kept by the killer. The fake blood device had a remote control. When Jefferson fell, the killer triggered the remote, releasing the blood at the perfect moment so that Jude's hands would become stained when he touched the body. The scene would look like a stabbing. The dagger, the blood, Jude's threat on video, the 9 seconds alone, and even the CCTV glitch, all worked together like gears in a single machine, built to ensure the town saw only one possible murderer. And the most terrifying part was that the machine was still running, and